Hi.
Hello.
In our response to the series on the book of Revelation, someone has asked the question, a good question, what should we do? What does Michael Gorman think we should do? And what does John Stott think we should do? John Stott's answer would be different than Michael Gorman's. Michael Gorman is an American theologian. So let's see what he sees as the greatest danger for Americans specifically. Don't forget, he's drawing his conclusions from the book of Revelation. So David is going to read a portion from the end of his book. Maybe you should show him the book again.
Reading Revelation responsibly. John Stott, what Christ thinks of the church. Here's Gorman toward the end of his analysis. Because the liturgical spirituality of Revelation is about allegiance and life, not just ritual and song, those who worship God and the Lamb must be deliberate in their refusal to engage in anything approaching idolatry, especially the syncretistic nationalism that permeates so many churches that may disagree, ironically, on many other matters. According to Revelation, in the church's worship, we should remember and honor prophets and martyrs, not, and this is where it gets touchy, not veterans and fallen warriors, faithful witnesses, not loyal patriots, the one who was slain to secure our true freedom, not the ones who killed and were killed to preserve, so it is claimed, our freedom. And then he italicizes this part, that this self-evident truth about worship seems so odd, so radical, simply demonstrates how comfortable the church has become in bed with the beast. In some churches, what should be unthinkable has become normal, even expected. In some, not to celebrate a national holiday, especially one that memorializes warriors, is a sin greater than skipping Monday, that is Holy Thursday, and Pentecost. Such holidays become civil religion versions of Good Friday, since the deaths of the fallen are treated as Christ-like sacrifices. Greater love has no one than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Of course, that's a verse from John 15. Is inappropriately transformed from a statement about discipleship to Christ into a militarized mantra about service to country. In Revelation, faithfulness is portrayed positively as following the Lamb and being marked with God's seal of ownership and protection. It is also portrayed negatively as not following the beast or receiving the mark of the beast. Together, these two images of faithfulness demonstrate that we cannot have it both ways. Beast and lamb, imperial power and lamb power, civil religion mixed with worship of God and the Lamb. And then he italicizes this next portion. This is an either-or proposition with very serious consequences. Italics over. There is no synthesis, no syncretism permitted here. The uncivil call of Revelation is to forsake the idolatrous worship of secular power and to worship God alone. Most of us do not like such either-or propositions when it comes to religion. We especially do not like choosing between civil religion and Christian discipleship. It's easier to have it both ways. What makes the both-and approach especially attractive is that it seems so right, so noble, so pious. Why is it so seductive? Because, according to Revelation, it is the deliberate, deceitful, demonic work of the propaganda mechanisms of the idolatrous imperial powers. Nationalistic allegiance or devotion, especially when dressed in religious garb, may not feel like idolatry, but Revelation makes us face the issue head on. So at the end of the book, Gorman's position is pretty clear as an American. And in case we don't get it, he goes on to summarize on the last couple of pages. Here he's talking in the part I just read about worship and how worship, the line of worship, has been transgressed by many Christians, he thinks. Here he's talking about what this means to our witness. What should we do? So we're back to the original question. What should Christians do in the light of that principle about worship? And now his heading in the last section is Embodied Communal Witness and Mission.
Okay, so his bottom line here. Revelation is not primarily a book to be dissected, but to be lived. That is the nature of resistance literature. Christian resistance, like warfare, is not passive, but active. It consists of the formation of communities and individuals who pledge allegiance to God alone, live in nonviolent love towards friends and enemies alike, leave vengeance to God, but bear witness to God's coming judgment and salvation. Create, by God's Spirit, many cultures of life as alternatives to empire culture of death, and invite all who desire life with God to repent and worship God and the Lamb. So that is his final word on.
Yeah. So Gorman's final word, and I don't doubt that there's a lot of people watching this video who will feel a sense of at least irritation and maybe revulsion at Gorman's position. Mm-hmm. Don't forget, though, he's an American, and as an American, he sees the line differently than a John Stott would. John Stott, in my experience, and I've read a lot of his stuff with Prophet, I believe he sees it as an Anglican would, and because the Anglican Church is the official religion of England. Mm-hmm. And that goes back 500 years. That's a different tradition. 500 years of that tradition of seeing government in one role. And America, of course, has no official religion. America is cleanly separating church from state. But the problem with that is, where you do that, you end up with an empire-like situation, like Rome. Rome had no official cult other than the empire in the person of Caesar. Yeah. If you didn't worship Caesar above all other allegiances, you transgressed. Mm-hmm. Now, in America and Canada and all other so-called democratic countries, we have that problem that England faces differently. Mm-hmm. So you might make the comparison with the Old Testament, that just as Stott and Gorman would come to different conclusions about where the line is. Mm-hmm. And we're not saying, by the way, that there is one, because I believe Christians have fought and died in wars, and I believe Christians have failed to fight or refused to fight in wars, but have nevertheless died in wars. Mm-hmm. I believe there's Christians in both camps, unlike the cults, unlike the Watchtower. Yeah. But on the other hand, in the Old Testament we have a like situation, that depending on where that person was, who was an Israelite or a Jew, let's say Joseph in Egypt, David in the Promised Land as king, and Daniel in Babylon as the third highest person in the Babylonian Empire, and Esther in Persia, and then there's Jeremiah in the Promised Land almost alone. So would you have different opinions? I believe you would, as to where the line is.
So for us, in today's world, it'll be different really based on where you live and under who you are being governed. You're going to come to different conclusions, and it's your job as a Christian to have awareness, to be discerning, to be able to see what would be crossing the line, to make your governing power almost in the position of God. Mm-hmm.
It's evident Gorman thinks millions of American Christians have crossed the line.
Yeah, blurring. He talks a lot about that, blurring of religious and with the secular. Yeah. And not being able to distinguish it, and making secular stuff sound religious. Yeah. So that's very seductive. That can easily make you sway.
I suppose then our bottom line should be, as conscientious Christians, we have to see clearly where that line is, if possible, because I think of the last title in the book is about our missionary witness, our communal witness, and we have to say, do we have a communal witness, since the church is so divided? We can't do what the cults do and draw a clean line and say, on that side of the line you're not a Christian. We have no community united witness anymore. And that's like the Old Testament.
And it's difficult, I think, for our generation, because the borders are so open to everybody. Yeah. You're seeing what's happening under other governments. So then the decisions all vary. And it's hard for you to just think about your own position, where you are, who you're being governed by, and make a decision, because it could differ so much from another. So the onlooker, the cultist, who looks on just sees divisions
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah, so I guess I'm going back to Paul's principle when he's talking about unity in the church. His guiding principle is not so much will you tongue speakers get to heaven and will you non-tongue speakers not get to heaven. That's not what he's arguing about in 1 Corinthians 14. When he says we've got to be conscious of does our trumpet sound a distinct or an indistinct call? And I believe as the Christian church has that responsibility to, at least to acknowledge that we do sound an indistinct call to the world.
Yeah.
They don't know what our position is on killing and warfare.
And if someone is following their conscience, we oftentimes make them uncomfortable with that, because that's not our position.
Yeah.
So we should never do that with our brothers.
No.
Make them feel uncomfortable to follow their own conscience.
So we don't want to judge. Not like in the old days when we had to judge if we were part of a religion. We don't have to judge, but we do have to be discerning. And so we should all, I think, put this issue of civil religion on the front burner and do some re-examination.
Talk about it. Don't avoid the subject.
We haven't done that now since the Council of Nicaea, I don't think. So we have 1,700 years of not seriously thinking about this. What's the role of Christian and what's the role of government? And how do these principles mesh and align? So I guess our bottom line should be we have to all individually and as church communities ask ourselves what our ultimate allegiance is. Is our ultimate allegiance, our ultimate loyalty to God or to something else? And
who are we following?
Who are we following? Are we following the Lamb? Or as Gorman puts it, are we in bed with the beast?